This ball is crushed. She is on! Fires! The chasing game! They're done! Alex Ovechkin is the greatest goal scorer in the history of the NHL. Sears! Gibby! Make free! Swing and a miss! Swing and a miss!
Welcome back to DC Sports Talk Extra. I'm your host, Jack Morrison, and this podcast is your home for all things Washington news, insights, and analysis for your Caps, Wizards, Nats, and Commanders. God, I almost forgot that. That would be problematic. Boy, alright, resetting. Tonight we're going a full deep dive into the revamped front office and coaching staff of the Washington Nationals. Paul Taboni is really going all in on completely overhauling this Washington team. And what he's done is, it's not just a personnel change, it's a systemic pivot with younger leadership, some Boston Tide hires, and a signal that Washington is continuing to plan the rebuild and the engine that's going to turn scouts and analysts into MLB contributors. So over this episode, we're going to examine those hires, the philosophies they bring, the measurable levers they can pull, and the concrete metrics that you should track in 2026 to judge success. So, first off, Paul Taboni, he rose through scouting ranks and then into broader front office responsibilities with Boston, and we touched on that in an earlier episode, emerging as a younger baseball executive who emphasizing melding scouting insight with data-driven player development. Unlike a purely sort of analytics-first GM, Taboni's path is scouting-rooted, which means his interventions will likely combine high-touch scouting evaluation with playbook-style development plans that leverage analytics. Why does this matter, right? Scouting-first leaders versus analytics-first leaders produce different draft profiles. Taboni's track record suggests prioritizing projection, or how raw skill can be coached, over purely outcome-based college stats. That implies more picks with projectable traits like arm strength, bat-to-ball profile, athleticism, accompanied by individualized development blueprints. It's also got an organizational culture effect, because you've got younger executives who promote people from their previous organization, often transplant those playbooks, communication norms, and KPIs. Right? Taboni's early hires from Boston indicate a quick transplant of a Red Sox-ish development framework into Washington. Expect short-term instability, but medium-term coherence if these systems take hold. Taboni will treat scouting and development as a continuum. The draft won't be a single event flush of picks. It'll be an iterative investment where each pick is accompanied by an 18 to 36 month measurable development plan. That's a key change from a front office that historically has compartmentalized scouting and player development. So, Taboni's first notable hire was Devin Pearson from Boston, an assistant GM level hire whose resume reflects heavy involvement in amateur scouting and draft execution. This is a classic Taboni move. Bring close collaborators who already speak the same language about talent evaluation. The Washington Post covered Pearson as Taboni's first major hire, and it was sort of a big deal for Taboni. Obviously, his first move as the president of baseball operations, it's got to be a good one. And it was. I think, some analytical implications of that draft playbook continuity. Because, look, Devin Pearson was part of that team that helped Paul Taboni, right? Drafting players like Kyle Teal, Peyton Tolley in Boston's system. And we talked about so many other podcasts in our Taboni episode. And, players that those are players that are generally chosen for tool set and growth potential, which is what the Nationals need. They need 5-tool guys. If Pearson can execute similarly to that in Washington, expect the Nats to chase positional athleticism and swing mechanics that can be optimized rather than purely college/line standouts. This is something that I think Mike DiBartolo was trying to do with that number 1 overall pick of Eli Willits. It's definitely Taboni has loved working with him, and I think that's going to be a lot of what we'll see over the next few years under Devin Pearson. Another thing is resource allocation, right? Pearson's presence as the assistant general manager signals that Taboni wants someone to own the amateur talent funnel and coordinate the signing, development, and tracking loops. Look for increased investment in scouting budgets, more granular amateur reports, and a stronger presence at showcase circuits, right? There are a lot of teams, the Nationals don't have that strong of a presence there, right? That's what I think they're trying to get Pearson to do. He was for the Red Sox, and he will continue to do so for Washington. Another guy I really like that they've added here is Justin Horowitz. He adds another experienced scouting development operator to the group, right? And he broadens capacity for evaluation and instructional oversight. He's also going to be in a GM advisory role or an assistant GM role, and he and Horowitz, or he and Pearson rather, together, that'll create a front office tandem that's capable of rebuilding the draft and the pipeline in Washington. In many organizations, who scouts and who develops are separate. Taboni's architecture appears to sort of collapse that taxonomy of the same thinking that scouts a player also designs their first 2 seasons of instruction. And I think that's critical for a new general, or for just a new front office in general. So now let's focus on some coaching hires and the development spine. Some names I want to focus on: Tyler Smarsluck, Simon Matthews, and Sean Doolittle. So, Taboni and the new manager, Blake Butera, who we'll talk about in a bit, they've been assembling a youthful and modern coaching staff. So, Tyler Smarsluck, the field coordinator, and was the first base coach in Miami as well as being their field coordinator. He is basically the on-field conduit for development. And Simon Matthews, the pitching coach, are both young, modern coaches with recent track records in infield and defense and pitcher mechanics and analytics, respectively. So, who is Tyler Smarsluck? Why does that field coordinator position matter? Right? Tyler Smarsluck came through as a college coach and minor league coaching pipeline, served as a first base, infield base running coach at the major league level, with the Marlins, and he managed a great squad over there. As the field coordinator, he'll oversee daily on-field instruction, coordinate minor league coaching methods, and implement base running and defensive standards across affiliates. That role matters because it's how front office development philosophies are operationalized, right? One other thing to note that I really want to harp on is Tyler Smarsluck, before he was hired by the Marlins, their fielding in general ranked 29th in the league. After 2 seasons being there, they became 4th in the league in fielding. Their base running was 30th in the league before he was hired. Now it's 14th. The Nationals need help in both of those perspectives, and I think Tyler Smarsluck, he's got a proven track record. This guy can shake up the Nationals big time. So, some consistency from that is really important. The field coordinator imposes a consistent set of drills, defensive principles, base running templates, all across the farm system and in the majors that reduces variance in coaching, which we've seen in Washington before. And it's going to make player comparisons much more reliable. And when your field coordinator is running standardized drills and testing, like pop times, reaction times, base running reads, arm strength, that sort of thing, the front office is going to receive clean, comparable developmental data, right? That allows Taboni, Pearson, Horowitz, whoever, to translate scouting assignments into development trajectories with quantifiable checkpoints. So now let's look at Simon Matthews, okay, the pitching coordinator. That's going to be a big part for the Nationals because their pitching, it's bad. We'll say that, right? And he's a young guy, and he has a modern philosophy of throwing sequencing and throwing hard, right? He's going to emphasize those sequencing, that throwing hard, but also some spin axis work and individualized pitch design, which we're seeing everywhere, up and down the country, but more from modern and younger coaches. So I think that's going to be really important for Matthews. Now, the Nationals pitching in 2025 had a team ERA of over 5. That's the lowest in team history ever since founding in 2005. So Taboni really needs some structural fixes, pitch design, sequencing, conditioning, and better data integration between analytics and on-field reps. That is really important for a young pitching coach, and I think we need to see that from Simon Matthews. One of my favorite hires is Sean Doolittle, right? I love this guy. He was an integral part of that 2019 World Series run, and despite some staff turnover, he appears to be retained in his strategically useful role. Keeping ties to players who bridge the old success and the new regime is a useful risk mitigation move to preserve that clubhouse winning spirit while the front office changes. Now, here's what the front office will actually try to change, like some of those measurable levers we talked about earlier. First, pitcher development and pitch design. Obviously, Simon Matthews has a lot to do with that. So, immediate things, development of fastball command. The Nationals don't have that. They're going to need it. Increased breaking pitch spin differentiation, right? Mackenzie Gore, a guy that's really good at this. Nobody else on the Nationals is good at this, right? Mitchell Parker, he's not. He's got great breaking pitches. He's got a solid changeup, a solid curveball, a solid slider, and a pretty decent fastball. But Matthews is going to help him throw that fastball harder and increase the spin rate in all of those. And most importantly for him is better sequencing, right? Mitchell Parker gave up a lot of home runs on pitches that he should not have thrown, right? And Simon Matthews not only going to help the pitchers with that, but also help the catchers. The Nationals have young catchers that don't necessarily know how to call a baseball game that well. And so that's definitely going to help. So some metrics that I'm going to be tracking, and you definitely should as well. Team strikeouts per 9. Team walks per 9. The chase rate, so percentages of swings, hitters against Nationals pitchers that swing at pitches outside the zone. Opponent runners left on base. That's an interesting one. It's going to see a lot to do with that bullpen. That Doolittle's going to have a huge role in that, and it's really going to be important to track. And of course, that spin rate separation on breaking pitches. There are a lot of places that'll tell you that, and the Nationals use that in their clubhouse. They should continue to, at least. Expect Taboni and Matthews and whoever to treat vertical and horizontal movement signatures as actionable variables. What I mean by that is that the team ERA was unusually high in 2025, and his horizontal movement, staying on plane with the baseball bat but trying to just jam the hitter or have him bite on a pitch outside, and vertical movement, so missing the barrel entirely, right? Those are things that just simply are necessary for baseball, and that has to be improved. Again, that ERA was unusually high. It highlights the need for intervention, and That's why you bring in a new pitching coach. That's why you bring in a new president of baseball operations, right? Then you've got the minor league instruction and the draft. You're going to draft and develop with unified defensive principles, base running protocols, and pitch release point consistency programs, throwing velocity maintenance plans. That's what Matthews can do. They want to draft for development, not purely for immediate production. More multi-year development blueprints drafted with picks. You want prospect age adjusted performance to be good, right? So relative to the league and your age, you want that age adjusted performance, which is critical. Juan Soto had the best one probably in the history of baseball for being 19 years old and winning a World Series. As well as walks per nine, K per nine changes for prospects. How much that margin improves for the existing guys that are going to come on with new Simon Matthews. That's going to be critical, and it's going to be a way that you can immediately tell how the Washington Nationals are doing. And as well as those spin and velocity trends across the system entirely. Lastly, you got the coaching and feedback loop, right? Some immediate things to track. Faster telemetry ingestion from games and practice. What I mean by that is you need to really hammer in what went wrong in a certain place, what went right in a certain place. Why does that need to continue to be happening? Why does that need to stop immediately? Right? The Washington Nationals in history have not been good at this. Okay? It's taken weeks for some one thing to be fixed. This can't happen under a new front office. Paul Taboni has been iron strict about this, right? It's going to improve. That's what we should expect. Then there's time-to-time improvements on standardized tests. This is pop time, arm strength, time to plate, bat sensors, reaction time, whatever it may be. That's going to be interesting to track. It's going to really say a lot about what the new coaching staff is doing for the development of this team. The quickest visible wins will come in variance reduction, so fewer catastrophic pitching outings, better defensive fundamentals, and improved base running decisions. These are the low-hanging fruits for a new coaching front office regime. The larger payoff, prospect maturation into regular MLB contributors, that's a 2 to 4 year horizon. So here are some risks that Paul Taboni is going to face and how he can detect them. First, I think, is a cultural mismatch, right? A Boston-style intervention may not immediately translate to a Nationals player culture. So watch for roster pushback or attrition. We've seen in press conferences. We saw it with Martinez last year. So ways to do this is to have veteran players. They've got a few veteran players, right? And have them step up in leadership roles that can really criticize the new instruction of the morale drops there, right? Second risk is the speed of the results. The public and the ownership may expect quicker wins than development is going to allow, right? A sign of this is, front office churn or mid-cycle changes. That's a risk, right? And a way to detect that cultural mismatch as well is if those veteran players are criticizing some of this stuff, right? If the morale drops, they can help when the morale drops. But if it does and they're not doing anything about it, that's a problem. Third is the draft miss risk. Paul Taboni does not have a very good miss risk on this. I mean, he drafted Roman Anthony. Like, these guys that he drafted, there are so many picks from Paul Taboni and from Devin Pearson that have made the MLB in 2 years and have been studs, right? If those miss, then this rebuild could be elongated. Over 2 to 3 seasons, if we see repeated poor prospect grades, That's a bad sign. So expect a true evaluation of Taboni's model at the 2 or 4 year mark. By then you'll see internal promotion rates, pitch decomposition improvements, and prospect conversion into MLB contributors. Short-term signals to monitor each season, like ERA improvements from the team and prospects, OAA and base running runs above average, and the prospects pipeline age-adjusted production, those are some stats we touched on earlier. That's going to be a true telltale sign over whether or not this is a success. And of course, the main man, the main hire, is of course the new manager, right? That's Blake Butera, the manager built for a developmental area. We've talked front office, we've talked field stuff, but this figure is right at the center of the on-field culture shift in Washington. We have to spotlight Blake Butera. All right, he's only in his early 30s. In fact, the day he was hired was actually the day that his daughter was born. He said that in his first press conference with Paul Taboni. That was the first thing he said. And in baseball years, being 33 years old, that makes him practically a startup CEO compared to the average MLB manager. But instead of being a liability, it's the exact reason that Paul Taboni wanted him at the front of the dugout. He fits the organizational age profile that Taboni is constructing, right? Young, modern, teaching-oriented, fluent in analytics, but not dependent on them to the point of losing baseball feel. Let's break down why he's such a critical piece of this rebuild. First, Butera didn't climb to the big leagues through the old-school pipeline at 15 years coaching winter ball, running spring drills. His path was different. He was a former infielder, rose quickly through Tampa Bay's system, became one of the youngest managers in pro baseball, excelled at guiding prospects through the jumpy transition points. A big name of this is Wander Franco. Okay, he helped him out. Obviously, Wander Franco has a whole lot of other things wrong with him, and hopefully, I really don't think we should talk about him too long. But helping those prospects, those stars with those jumps from high A to double A, from low A to high A, from triple A to the bigs. He helps with those, and that's where he excels. Tampa Bay trusted him with real responsibility. The Rays, they were like, this guy is a big role here. And their system in Tampa Bay, that's built on data. It's built on data-fed player development. And they don't just put anybody in charge of that. It's what they've been doing for the longest time. It's what they do in Tampa Bay. And they don't put anybody in charge of managing that. They put Blake Butera because he got that trust. He's a communication asset. He knows how to talk to 18-year-old draft picks and 28-year-old veterans in the same language. With Taboni coming from Boston and similarly youthful hires like Tyler Smarslock and Simon Matthews, Butera fits like a keystone piece. He's the manager designed for a teaching-first roster, not a win-now, veteran-dominated locker room. Here's why Butera is appealing to Taboni, right? He's building what looks like a flat, communicative, feedback-driven baseball operation. That is key. The Boston pipeline he came out of works best when data people, scouts, minor league coaches, and major league staff are all speaking the same language to discuss player traits. Butera has always shown that he thrives in that model. He's young enough to be flexible, old enough in baseball context to command a room, and modern enough to implement system-wide standards without resistance. In simpler terms, Butera can carry Taboni's development directives down to the players. He can carry player feedback up to the front office without distortion. That is the connective tissue Washington has lacked since the decline of that 2017-2019 core. Here's what he actually brings between the lines, the metrics that'll tell you whether or not his leadership is working. His managerial strengths, communication and buy-in. Butera's calling card and what he promised to harp on has always been clarity. His minor leaguers routinely talked about how they always knew what the plan was, when they needed to adjust, what they needed to adjust, and what the next developmental checkpoint looked like. This is what Washington fans want. It's what Washington players want. It's what Washington's front office wants. It creates organizational tempo. It's a rhythm of how the system is working. How can we measure it? Well, if promotions are aligned with performance, they're not random or stagnated, which we've seen. If there's fewer plate appearance volatility spikes in prospects, consistent usage pattern for younger pitchers, player quotes that reference clear plans, feedback loops, and consistent messaging. We've seen this from all of Butera's players, right? And if we get it from big league players in Washington, that's critical. And it's going to show that Butera is doing his job well. This is tougher to interpret than raw stats, but it is arguably more important. Now, given Washington's disastrous pitching results, right? Again, that team ERA was over 5. Butera is stepping into a storm, but the Rays' influence shows up here. He's been trained to handle openers, structured piggyback roles, innings caps, scripted outings based on pitch characteristics, instead of rigid starter reliever labels. This is something Martinez was good at, and it's something that the Nationals players are used to. So that's definitely a lot to look out for. So here's something to watch. Reduction in high pitch count innings. Martinez was not good at this. This is what Butera is good at. Then, more efficient outings from younger arms. So like pitches per plate appearance, for instance. Better sequencing, right? This is something Simon Matthews, again, wants to focus on. And, of course, fewer two-strike mistakes. There were too many home runs, too many big hits this year given up with 2 strikes, right? Butera's going to fix that. Then there's the bullpen ERA volatility decreasing year to year, right? The bullpen ERA is off the charts terrible. And if he can get that to stabilize, Butera's managerial fingerprints will be all over it. Then he's got that Rays influence. Butera comes from the organization that literally invented the opener. And it normalized defensive shifts years before the rest of the league caught up. Expect aggressive platoons, matchup-based bullpen usage, positionally flexible in-game moves, earlier hooks for struggling starters, more stolen base attempts, and hit-and-run triggers once Smarslock's base running instruction kicks in. Some metrics to track. Platoon advantage percentage, how often the Nats have the better matchup. Defensive alignment effectiveness, OAA improvement with smarter positioning. Stolen base success rate improvement. The Nats are good at stealing bases, but let's make it better. Run value through base running. Okay, that's called BSR. It's important, and it's where Butera's game management is going to become quantifiable. It's what Smarslock is good at, and it's a clear way to measure. Speaking of Smarslock, well, I mean, it's a great structural element that Paul Taboni has done, pairing Butera with Tyler Smarslock as the field coordinator. Think of it this way. Smarslock designs the drills, the base running programs, the defensive footwork patterns, the daily development routines. Butera is the major league interpreter, the one who implements it with MLB players and ensures that it is respected as a priority. This duo is young, energetic, modern, and completely aligned with player development principles. In an organization that has long relied on veteran coaches like Bobby Henley, Tim Bogar, even Gerardo Parra. In an organization that's relied on that, this youth movement is more than symbolic, it's architectural. Now, the biggest risk factor for Blake Butera is the veteran buy-in. With any young manager, there's a potential friction point, those veterans. If the roster contains legacy players who expect the clubhouse to run the old way, Butera is going to face a credibility test. Lucky for him, Washington's roster actually works in his favor. There are lots of young players, not many entrenched all-stars, a rebuilding context where players are fighting for opportunity, and a front office that is willing to protect him through early turbulence. Paul Taboni said, "I'm confident in this guy. He knows what he's doing. Let's let him do it." This is the ideal environment from a young, developmental-faced manager. He's not inheriting a win-now pressure cooker. He's inheriting a construction site. And on a construction site, you can only go to something better. Realistically, Blake Butera is not being hired to maximize win probability in 2026. He's being hired to shape communication culture, development expectations, instructional consistency, modern in-game strategy habits, player buy-in around analytics and daily routines. His value is cumulative. Year to year, he's like compound interest. Each season, the system becomes a little more aligned, a little more predictable, a little bit more modern. And if the Nationals become a consistent playoff threat in 2028-2030, Butera will be one of the reasons why, and possibly the major one. Butera is the perfect managerial match for Taboni. Young, development-focused, fluent in analytics, and experienced in Tampa Bay's data-driven system. Right? His background sets him up to communicate development plans directly and clearly to younger players, a major shift for Washington. Expect some Rays style tactical flexibility, platoons, aggressive bullpen usage, positional versatility, more stolen base attempts. Some key metrics to watch under Butera: platoon advantage rate, bullpen ERA volatility, run value added through base running, prospects time to improvement cycles. Just as sort of a summary there. Butera, Smarzlak, the instructional backbone of the organization. One drives the drills, the other drives the dugout. The biggest risk, ensuring that veteran buy-in. But Washington's roster is young enough that the risk is incredibly minimal. Butera is not a short-term win maximizer. He is a culture and development architect whose impact compounds over years. This is why I think that Blake Butera hire is one of the best that Washington has done. I think it's the smartest. I think it's definitely going to help them the most long term. And I think he's going to be quickly a top 10 manager in the MLB. So that'll be it for today's episode of DC Sports Talk Extra. I'm your host, Jack Morrison. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into the Washington Nationals coaching staff. We'll see you soon for episode 9. But until then, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you next time.